Hi, I'm Rachel Lancaster, and this is the Magnificent Midlife Podcast. This is where we celebrate women in midlife and beyond. We challenge the status quo and bash those negative stereotypes about being an older woman. We're not over the hill at 40, 50, 60. We're just getting started, and the world needs us now more than ever. I'll be talking all things midlife and sharing some fabulous stories of amazing women doing very cool stuff. Now's our time. My guest today is Hattie Voelcker, and I'm delighted to introduce you to her. She used to be a barrister, and she now works with performers and particularly singers, helping them feel confident and get their very best performance. So, Hattie, how did you come to be doing what you do now?
That's a very good question. It was a long and probably circuitous route. I was a barrister for about 10 years, and it's a fascinating job, and I loved it. And at the same time, I also restarted singing, because I stopped singing for about 20 years and had huge difficulties with my voice. And I started singing again, and I went to Ames International Music School, and I started to look at what was going on in my head as well as what was going on with my vocal technique. I then hit a bump in the road in terms of my being a barrister, because I became ill. I developed postural tachycardia syndrome, which is a chronic illness that affects your heart rate and blood pressure.
Ooh.
Yeah, it bit you. And it meant I couldn't be a barrister anymore. So I had to look around for something else to do with my time. And I retrained as a life coach. So the retraining as a life coach at the same time as stopping being able to be a barrister and looking at these singers all came together to make me look at the singers and go, okay, what's going on in their heads? What makes a really good singer? And what's the difference between one that really holds your attention and captivates you and one that's just got a nice voice? And it turned out to be sort of a similar thing to what made a good barrister. Because to be a good barrister, it's not really about the intellect, it's not just about the experience, it's about how you captivate your various audiences and how you understand the relationships that are going on between wants and needs and all those manifold different tensions that build up in the courtroom. And being a good performer is about how you connect with your audience, how you understand with your audience, how you understand your audience and how you engage them. And so that's where I work now, in that sort of area, getting people to understand their audiences and understand themselves in that context.
It's wacky, isn't it, how you can see parallels in completely different worlds, and yet they're there, aren't they?
They're there, and you say completely different worlds, but in many ways, barristers are performers.
Yeah. As
we all are. We all look at the outside world as if we're performing to an audience. It's just, I think, for singers in particular, there's a particular vulnerability when you stand up and you sing, because people feel like they're showing their soul when they sing, and that makes them feel very vulnerable. And really the key is, how do you get comfortable with that vulnerability?
What was it about your, obviously there's the performance aspect of being the barrister, but were there other things as well, skills that you could bring from that training or that, experience of being a barrister to what you do now?
Absolutely. I mean, we were always taught when we were trained as barristers, never ask a question to which you don't have a really good idea of what the answer is going to be. So you don't ask a question, just throw it out there and hope for the best. You ask a question, you pretty much know what the answer is going to come back at you. In order to do that, you've got to understand people's wants, their needs, their underlying motivations. And that applies to the person you're cross-examining, your opposite counsel, the judge on the bench. You have to understand where their mind is going so that you can play these off and work out where you want to get to. And that means a really good understanding of people. So I spent 10 years learning to understand people's motivations. And it's by understanding people's motivations and, to a certain extent, their vulnerabilities, that's the key to the work I do now, because it's, as I said, the key is to how do you get to a place where you are comfortable with your vulnerability? And to do that, you have to understand what people's vulnerabilities are. And so all those years working with people, I was a family law barrister for much of my time, which is an area where people feel incredibly vulnerable.
Oh, yes.
Exactly. They have a lot to lose there, and there are lots of emotions at play. So that gave me a huge step forward. And now I get to work with those in a really positive way. Although I always viewed family law as the most positive aspect of law, because it's really the only area of law where you are looking to make things better in the future. But now I can look to help people make their own futures better.
Did you feel though, I mean, I confess I've actually ended up in court with divorce, and it really, for me, it felt like, you know, the last case scenario sort of thing. It was really what you don't want to do. You want to stay out of court, you don't want to end up there. And then when I did, it was mortifying, actually. It was really not so good. So I don't know, what do you think about that?
It's an incredibly vulnerable place for people to be. Nobody wants to be there. It's nobody's desired outcome to end up arguing in court. People have got to there, as you say, as a last resort, because nothing else is working for them. And I was always keenly aware that my every day was people's worst day and most important day often of their lives. And there was that pressure. And how do you hold people through that process and help them feel safer and more contained, because it can feel such an alien world and so out of control. Often, especially with divorce, a lot of what was going on was a power struggle. Each side believing that the other side had more power than them. And if you can unpick that, then you can move forward. And a lot of the bit I found rewarding was when I managed to do a negotiation or a mediation where you could get the clients stepping towards each other and coming to a solution that worked for both of them. Those were the most rewarding days in court.
So what was it like, sort of going from what must have been very high powered and pretty stressful, it sounds like, to doing what you do now? Are you happier doing what you do now? Is it different? Is it better?
I love what I do now. It's entirely rewarding. It's exactly where I feel I'm meant to be right now. I have to say the journey to get here wasn't always easy. Giving up the kudos of being a barrister was probably easier for me than it was for my parents. You know, it's quite nice being able to say your daughter's a barrister. I mean, they're hugely supportive of me. They never put any pressure on me at all, and they love what I do, and they love the fact I love what I do. But saying I'm a barrister is an entree into any conversation. Yes. Suddenly you are on a par with doctors, and everyone goes, oh, okay. Oh,
you're somebody worth paying attention to.
All of which is rubbish, because I'm a great person. And, you know, there are good barristers and there are bad barristers. We're just people.
And it's a label like any other, isn't it?
Exactly. And in fact, what's interesting is there's a huge amount of impostor syndrome throughout the legal profession, especially in the court area, including judges. I mean, I've spoken to a Court of Appeal judge who said every day he would go and sit on the bench and think, today is the day where I get found out. Today is the day where I walk in and they go, my goodness, how did he end up where he is? We need to get him off quickly. So if you can get to being a Court of Appeal judge and still feel that way, it says something interesting about the profession.
Yeah, but that's actually in a way quite reassuring for me to hear that such a senior man is feeling that, because usually it's certainly, I think, more attributable to women than men. So that's very interesting for me to hear that.
It's interesting because I do a lot of work with men in my business now, and I think I think imposter syndrome is there, but they're just less willing to recognize it. For me, I think the difference between men and women is that men feel they're the only ones who feel that way in their group, whereas we women are more likely to talk about it, and we view it as something that we all share. Women are more likely to say the word just. I mean, why do we use just?
Yeah. Oh, yes.
I'm just going to put the kettle on. No, I'm going to put the kettle on.
I'm just calling to find out.
And I don't mind that if we're doing it consciously as a strategy to make someone else feel comfortable, but we do it unconsciously. So
yeah, it's like a tick, isn't it? It's like, I'm just doing this, I'm just doing that.
Just do, absolutely. Yeah. But I think men, I think it's there. They just feel they're the only ones. And so they're less willing to admit to it.
So do you find that coming up quite a lot now in what you do? Absolutely.
I mean, because I work with people who want to put themselves out in public, everyone shares the same biggest fear when putting themselves out in public, and that is that they will make a fool of themselves. That's what they really fear. They fear looking stupid. And the truth is, when you put yourself out in public, you will be judged. I can't say that people won't judge you. You will be judged. And it's a question of how you face that judgment. And I think with the men I work with, it comes up with that idea of it's make or break. They can't show any vulnerability because they have to be strong. And it's that Brené Brown concept that men can't be weak and women have to be perfect. With the women, that idea of perfection is so strong and is so influential on their willingness to put themselves out there and how they behave when they are, their self-criticism. And in the singers I work with, that shows up in tension in the voice, in keeping themselves small, that word just, that tendency to keep yourself small. And the idea that I'll do it when I'm perfect. I'll do it when I've lost 30 pounds. I'll do it when I've sorted this bit. I'll do it when my vocal technique, I've got that sorted. And actually putting yourself out there and realizing that audiences want imperfection because that's the humanity we connect with. That's a scary thing to do.
So how do you help them with the aspect of courage? Because that's what they need, isn't it?
Well, it's that another Brené Brown concept, that idea that vulnerability and courage are actually two sides of the same coin. The idea that to be courageous requires vulnerability, because you can't be courageous doing something you don't feel vulnerable about. That's just doing stuff.
Yeah.
And the other idea of how do you get to a place where you are okay now? Not any changes, just as you are now, and separating the act from who you are. So just because you make a mistake doesn't make you useless. There's another favourite saying of mine, is clever people do stupid things all the time.
And stupid people do clever things.
Sometimes. Absolutely. And that idea that just because you messed up, I mean, that's just entirely human and it's okay. And you forgive yourself. And if you can get to a place where messing up is just something that feels horrible, no denying it feels horrible when you mess up. But then if you can forgive yourself and get back out there, you're stronger for it.
Yeah, you're always stronger in the end if you do sort of, feel the fear and do it anyway, aren't you? If you move past, and as you say, without fear, there isn't any courage, because you've got to go to that place to be able to then kick in the courage and move on.
And offer yourself some humanity, some understanding, some empathy. Empathy starts, neurologically, they've established that empathy starts with ourselves. The more empathy we can offer ourselves, the more capable we are of compassion and empathy for others. But we don't always view it that way. We feel like we're being soft on ourselves, if ourselves understanding. And we need to pull up our socks and just get on with it. And actually, one of my clients, her biggest fear was looking nervous in front of an audience. And when I unpicked it, it was that idea, well, that's a completely rational fear. It's entirely rational to worry, to be nervous on stage and to worry about being nervous. But everybody's nervous on stage.
Yeah.
Everybody worth their salt who's doing something that matters to them is nervous. Well, that's okay. And by giving herself that understanding, the next time she went and performed, a lot of the rest of the fear had disappeared, because it was the fear of her fear that was bigger than the actual fear.
Yeah. Wow, it's fascinating. So what have you had to change about yourself to go down this path?
Another good question. Well, I've had to walk the walk. I've had to learn to like myself. And there's a very good reason I became a barrister, because I felt that if I could have that sort of kudos, that sort of career, then that would mean I was okay. But that external validation didn't bring me everything I wanted it to bring me. And it was that idea that I'm okay. I'd say my journey was twofold. Firstly, I learned that I'm okay. As I stand, as I am now, I'm not amazing, I'm not terrible. I'm me, I'm just as good as everybody else. There is no hierarchy. We are all doing the best we can in this life.
Yeah.
And then the second part of my journey was learning, it's that Oscar Wilde quote that apparently isn't Oscar Wilde quote. It's be yourself, everyone else is taken.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Yes, I love it. That, and not only that, but if you try to be somebody else, you'll only ever be second best.
Yeah.
And the best person you can be is you. And if you can truly, authentically be you, then you open up a whole realm of possibilities.
And do you think also, I mean, this is something that I've worked on as I've gone through my own midlife journey, is that whole need for authenticity just becomes bigger and bigger. Certainly it has for me. But as you say, I spent years being somebody else, really, or trying to be somebody else and failing miserably at it, quite frankly. And I kept doing that. I was okay, I was successful, but I wasn't happy, and I wasn't comfortable. I don't know, what do you think?
Absolutely. I mean, I do a talk about that whole idea that from the external perspective, I had a beautiful house, I had a fabulous husband, I had 2 children at that stage, I now have 3, I had a successful career as a barrister. It looked like I had everything. But what I was doing was shaving bits off myself and trying to stick bits on to make myself this perfect thing, believing that would make me happy.
Yeah.
And all it did was bring me misery, because I was never good enough. It was always, what else do I have to change to make it perfect? And I think I said in my questionnaire to you that idea of actually getting into my 40s and realizing that perfection was no longer possible as the pimples developed on my face and everything heads south. It was just like, that was freeing. I don't have to be perfect.
But then what is perfect? You see, I would say that we are perfect exactly as we are. That's my thinking. I would say you are perfect exactly as you are. It's society that tells us what is and isn't perfect.
Yes, it's that difference between perfect as an objective ideal, which I think for so many of my years, I thought there was this idea of perfect.
Yeah.
That I was heading towards, and I wanted my trajectory to head me towards. And actually, perfect as an emotion is more like those park bench moments where you're looking at the sunset and you're going, wow, this is just amazing. And you do something that really brings you joy, and you go, you lean into that and go, this moment is perfect. How I feel is perfect. Perfect as an emotion is attainable. But that external objective brings us nothing but misery.
Yeah. Because then we're always just comparing ourselves to everybody else, aren't we?
And coming up short.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, the only thing we know about perfectionism is if you're a perfectionist, you will never, ever be happy. Because even if somebody else thinks what you did was perfect, and you think in the moment it's perfect, I've known too many perfectionists to know that half an hour, a week, a month down the line, they'll look back and go, well, yeah, I could have done that bit better, and they'll start pulling it apart. And so it's an unachievable ideal.
They've managed to talk themselves out of it, haven't they?
Absolutely. Every time, because it's always what next. They're never looking back with that sense of ease. And it's that idea and the power of now, that life is just an infinite series of nows. That's something that really made a difference. And the other aspect that's really made a difference in my life is fun. That fun is not only enjoyable and fun, vital.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
And the singers I can get to have fun come back and go, but my vocal technique was amazing. Yeah, because you were not controlling it. There was no tension.
Yeah.
You were suddenly in flow, enjoying it, which allowed your body space and your subconscious space to do what it knows best.
So is it a lot of what you do? Is it like breaking down all of those sort of negative thoughts that people have and all that then translates into the body? Because singing is such a physical thing, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And making them aware that this quest for perfection is actually having a negative thing. If they're always looking for their imperfections, they'll always find imperfections. We can always find imperfections. If they're looking for a connection with their music, with their emotions, with their body, and then with their audience and their environment, that's where they'll find that magic. That's where they'll find the joy. And if they can find that magic and that sort of feeling, then neurologically speaking, with mirror neurons and concepts like that, their audience will feel it too.
Yeah.
And that's when you engage them.
Yeah. And I think it's really interesting that singing, I'm actually a singer as well.
Really?
And I'm not currently singing, which is not good. I need to get back to singing. But so I sing gospel. I'm not a believer, but I sing in a gospel choir and I love it. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
And it brings so much joy. It absolutely brings so much joy. And I think it's very interesting that often with sort of mental health issues, singing is sort of thrown out there as being one of the great ways to feel good, to feel joy. And that's why I love gospel, because even though I don't believe it, it is so joyful.
Yes.
You are making a joyful noise. But yeah, singing is very powerful, isn't it, from that perspective?
It is hugely powerful. And it's heartbreaking how many singers lose contact with that in their quest for becoming a better singer. They squish the joy to try and improve the technique. And it's actually if we think, my best singing was probably when I was about 13, 14, when I sang for sheer joy. Yeah. And I wasn't worried what people thought of me at that stage.
Yeah.
And this amazing voice came out. And as soon as all the worries and the fears and the judgment complications came in, that's when my voice became tied and boxed.
Yeah.
And actually,
that's classic puberty as well, wasn't it? The coinciding with puberty, I'm guessing.
Yes, totally. Absolutely. Yeah. And also the female voice breaks. So my big problems arose when I was about 17, 18, 19. And the female voice starts to break at that stage.
Does it? I didn't know that.
Yes, it does. Because we don't sound how we did at 16.
Yeah, I guess. It's not such a radical transformation, though, is it, as a man?
Exactly. I mean, if you think of the transformation for the man and how big their vocal box gets, which is why they have the Adam's apple and it starts to stick out. Our transformation isn't that drastic. to watch my 13-year-old go from being a boy treble to being a tenor in the space of about 6 months. Boom.
Really?
No, ours is more gradual, but it's still that process of how do we get used to this new, bigger voice? And the transition, I mean, for opera singers, sometimes they don't reach maturity till their mid-30s, certainly not till their late 20s. And that coincides with emotional maturity as well. But that transition can be so critical, as you say, that those teenage years, all that insecurity piles on. It's hard to cope with.
So what advice do you have for a woman in midlife who might be in a big high-powered job, but it just isn't really doing it for her anymore?
That's a good question. First piece of advice would be pause. Because I remember that stage where I was up to my eyeballs in kids, job, marriage, house, everything. And there was no way I was going to see the wood for the trees. As so many people who've had chronic illnesses in their midlife will say, actually the illness was a blessing because it made me stop. It would have been so much better if I'd stopped before the illness kicked in. If I'd recognized the mental health aspects of what I was doing to myself. Because I have no doubt that some of the things I was thinking didn't help, and how I was trying to cope didn't help with the physical side and me getting ill. But pause, because life's about an enjoyment. I was talking about before. And if you're not enjoying your job, and if you have children and you're not enjoying your children, and you're not having fun, then now's the time to reassess and work out what would bring you joy. Because that's so much more important, not only for you in your mental health, but also for your children. Because what you're modeling for them, if you can model some joy and fun, is that life is about fun and joy and happiness and relationships and interactions. So I think the biggest thing is to pause, to give yourself space and time to work out what's really important to you.
I think that's absolutely crucial, isn't it? Yeah. And I think, well, I'm always saying, I think midlife is this wonderful time when we can indulge in the business of being us.
Yeah.
And we can find out what it is that we want for the next exciting stage, rather than just, not living the life we've ended up with necessarily, but actually having that pause, having that time, and then being proactive about where we want to take life next.
Absolutely. And I always talk about SMOG words. Actually, it's SMOG.
SMOG words.
SMOG words, yes. So should, must, ought, and got. And there's also have to and need, but schmong doesn't sound as good. But because need is my big one. It comes up in my life all the time. I need to do this. I need to do that. And I talk about them being words of shame and obligation. But it's external. They're things that we have this idea that there's this external force that's saying, I should clean the kitchen. I should take my children to football every week. I must do this. We ought to do that. We've got to do this. And they're disempowering words.
Yeah.
And they make us feel heavy and like we're failures because we don't do what we should. Then what does that say about us? If we don't do something we ought to do, what does that say about us? And even if we do, well, you only did what you should have done. There's no applause in that. There's no pat on the back. It's all heavy and there's no reward. If we can change those into either what I call well words or wise words. So well words, want, enjoy, like, and love. If we can focus on why should we do that? Well, we should do that because I want to do this. Then can we bring that want back in and say, well, I want to do that because I want to achieve that. Can we make it something that's aspirational? Sometimes that's too hard. And sometimes that's why I use wise words. So wise, intelligent, sensible, or effective. So instead of it being something I should do, is it wise that I do this? Is it important that I do this? Intelligent, important, I think is what I usually say. Sensible or effective. Wise, important, sensible, or effective that I do things. Because again, if you do something wise, what does that say about you? There's a pat on the back. And there's more of a movement forwards if you're doing that, if you're phrasing it in that way, and it feels more positive and more empowering.
I love that. I love those. I'll be writing those down in the show notes. Fantastic. Yeah, really good aid memoirs to think differently about things. Yeah. And that's very cool.
It's a really good shortcut. I've got a workbook I give out on it, but it's a really good shortcut and a really good red flag. If you're saying the word should, it's a red flag that something's going on for you.
Yeah. And we all know as well, we've looked at this with relationships within the members club, but when you say should to anybody, it's a red flag to them as well as a red flag to you, isn't it? It's like, I'm not going to do it if you tell me I should do it.
The rebellious child kicks in all of us.
Oh, yes.
Should I really? Should I? I might pass off my nose to spite my face and not do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I have to be careful with that. I can get a bit shouldy at home sometimes.
It's what we grew up with. It was how we were taught by our parents, how we were taught at school. You should all sit still, you should do this, you should do that, you've got to do this. And it doesn't make us feel very adult.
No. No, it doesn't, does it? So what do you like about your time of life?
As I said, one of the things I like most is that sense of freedom. That idea of, now I've discovered it, that I can do what the hell I want. And also, I'm an adult. I'm a grown-up. I can actually trust myself to make sensible decisions, to do the good stuff. I don't have to use the word should, because actually if I ask myself what's important, what do I want, I come up with good answers.
Yeah. Good for you. Good for you.
And it's okay to have fun.
Yeah. That's so important. I think we lose sight of that, don't we? We lose sight of fun, having fun. I think, we should build it into every day. It would be useful to build it into every day.
It'd be so wise to bring fun.
So wise, that's it. It would be so wise.
Yeah, and you think of the physical freedom fun brings you. I had a client, and every time she sang as a hobby, she sang beautifully and with freedom. Every time she sang as a job, she felt she should take it really seriously. And there was a pressure on her to take it seriously, and she lost that freedom simply because she was being paid. And why did that need to happen? Why do we have to take it seriously? Well, we have to take it seriously and not do it frivolously, but we can still enjoy it. We can still lean into the fun and the joy of what we're doing. And our audience and the people we're with and the people we're working with will benefit from that. We all love working with people who bring that energy to the room.
And is there anything you dislike about your time of life?
It's that point at which you can see the beginning and you can see the end. And it's the idea that, I look at my parents, who are fabulous people, who've had fabulous lives, and they're becoming more frail and more vulnerable, and we'll be there. It's inevitable. And so I suppose that then brings me back to that idea of how important fun is, because if I don't enjoy the next 1, 2, 40, 50 years, if I don't make the most of it, what's life about?
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Magnificent Midlife podcast. It would really help me get the message out and inspire more women to feel empowered in midlife and beyond if you left me a 5-star review on iTunes or wherever you may be listening to this. And share this podcast with your friends too. If you'd like to take your own midlife up a notch, why not join our members club? It's where you'll find the strategies, support and connection you need to live the very best next phase of life. You can find out more and get the show notes for this episode at magnificentmidlife.com. Help me change the world one midlife woman at a time.